A game based on the movie? Oh no. I think a bad game review is coming early this week. Well, actually, True Lies isn't technically a bad game. It's challenging, and it definitely has its frustrating parts, but True Lies for the Sega Genesis can also be really fun. First of all, the best part of this game, you're playing as Arnold Schwarzenegger. How awesome is that? I mean, any game where you play as Arnold automatically gets like 3 style points. And on top of that, you get all these different weapons you can use to kill enemies in gruesome ways. Like, you can be Arnold with a shotgun, walking around the mall, shooting terrorists in the chest, and they just fall down and blood splatters everywhere. It's awesome. I mean, the pure cheesy violence of this game is fantastic. And of course, the absolute best part of playing a game as Arnold Schwarzenegger is doing all his lines as you execute the enemies. Sure, here's my invitation. And this game follows the movie True Lies to a T. It really feels like you're playing through the whole movie and running around all the places that were in the movie. Like, in the beginning, you had that chateau with a bunch of rich people dancing around, then you had the snow level, you chased the terrorists through a mall, there were office buildings, just everything that's in the movie is in this game. And that's one of the things that makes this a really professionally made game. You can really tell that the people who made it put a lot of thought and effort into it, even despite the fact that it is very challenging, almost to a frustrating extent, a lot of the time. Don't wake this terrorist. He's dead, tired. Hey Benny! Screw you! It's not just that all the levels are basically scenes from the movies, it's also the fact that there are a ton of levels. I feel like if you put all the levels together in one massive world, it would be a huge open world game. All the levels are basically a maze where you have to run from room to room or corridor to corridor, kill all the enemies, and progress further. You do this by just walking around and finding your way further, and sometimes you have to find things like key cards to open doors. The biggest problem with this game that I found is the difficulty is inconsistent. You'll have one level where the enemies are challenging but fairly simple to take out if you use good strategy, and another level where enemies are just running around like crazed bees and just shooting you from all angles. There's explosives, there's steam coming from the walls to burn you. I mean, some levels get absolutely ridiculous. Let off some steam, Bennett. The strategy when killing the enemies is basically range and timing. You have to line yourself up just right so the enemy projectiles don't hit you or just hit you a little bit, and you are able to take out the enemy really fast with all the different weapons you have. Some enemies are just static and stand there. These are pretty easy. But some enemies, as I've said, run around like crazy bees on speed. You also have this rolling evade technique, but it's not very useful in combat and kind of hard to execute to your advantage. And there's even a level where you fly that jet, you know, just like in the movie. I mean, it's supposed to play like a scrolling shooter, but the enemies are ridiculously fast. They're shooting you from all angles. Your jet is just huge on the screen, so you're gonna get hit by basically every enemy that shoots you just because of how much area you take up on the screen. This level is ridiculously hard and annoying. That's really the game's main problem. It gets way too hard at certain points, but I feel like the good graphics and the satisfying campy and gruesome ways you kill the different enemies with your different weapons makes up for that. There is more good in this game than bad. And because you're playing as Arnold Schwarzenegger, arguably the coolest living man on Earth today, I don't think any red-blooded man would argue that, that makes the game exponentially cooler. Tom Arnold, I've seen you before. You're that asshole on TV. The game also has civilians in the levels, which you have to avoid and not shoot, and that's pretty hard, especially when you're using weapons like shotguns. When you kill 3 civilians, you have to start the level over again. So you do get a penalty for killing them, but sometimes it's just fun to do it, like causing havoc in GTA or something. See, the best thing in life is to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of the women. And in this game, you get to do that with extreme prejudice. True Lies for the Sega Genesis is a sometimes difficult and frustrating experience, but ultimately, it is a fun one. It gets an official stanburdman rating of a 7 out of 10. Remember when I said basically all movie-based games are complete garbage? I lied. Not enjoying movie-based games. Consider this a divorce.